Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America Trading Corporation. Thank you for joining us for our podcast here today entitled The Secret War on Cash. I have with me Chris Agelastos, my co-host. Chris, good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Good to be here.
Well, good to have you here, actually. We are normally doing these podcasts in the morning, but we're getting a little bit of a later start here today. But let's get right into it. I mean, a lot's been happening in the markets and in the economy. We've really been following quite closely what's been happening in the financial markets, specifically the stock market over the course of the last several months, anyways, off and on, I should say. This article that on the first article we want to discuss here on your screen, entitled 2024 will be the toughest labor market in our lifetime. And part of the reason I wanted to kind of highlight this is that's a pretty bold statement to say it will be the toughest labor market in our lifetime. And what was interesting is I first saw the title or the headline here, I automatically just kind of assumed it was related to some of the trials or difficulties that corporations are dealing with right now in terms of keeping workers on board versus having to cut back on their labor and that type of thing. But as I got into this article, it actually gets into things that really, to some extent, aren't even related to that at all. So tell us a little more about what the author here is discussing about the toughest labor market in our lifetime.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big factors here is that it is encompassing a whole lot of factors, kind of like a perfect storm, if you will. So, I mean, we've been talking about things like, AI, maybe taking some jobs or shifting jobs around and whatnot. But some of the things he talks about in here, population decline and retiring baby boomers, which, makes sense if you think about it. If a large section of our workforce is now retiring or passing away, right, that's obviously going to cause a problem. It talks about Gen Z, and not to bash on them, right, but they spend 4 hours a day on average on social media, and maybe have a little bit distorted view over what the typical workforce or job looks like. And so you've got millions of them. They say 7 million, working aged adults just unemployed or not even looking for work, which I think my generation, we never would have even thought that was an option to not look for work. And then add to that, you have people job hopping, moving from company to company, whereas, loyalty used to be a little bit bigger of a thing. And some would blame the companies for that. A lot of companies have not treated workers the best in the past. And people are learning if I want to make more money, I need to move to a new company and they'll pay me more. So right. All of these factors, I don't know if any one of them would be big enough to really affect the labor market this year. But when you combine all of those things, I mean, he makes a good point that we're headed for quite the storm.
Yeah. And, it's what's funny about this, a few days prior, I'd read another article where Jim Bianco, who's a big money manager, was just talking about how the labor numbers or job numbers that the government is coming out with, he called them fake, like flat out fake.
Yeah.
And for different reasons, but the one of the things that he cites is that we have our labor force. He said, if I remember correctly, is like 168 million, somewhere in that ballpark. And for the last 5 out of 6 weeks, the government has been reporting that the jobless filings have totaled exactly 212,000 jobless filings on the nose. On the nose. He said it's literally statistically impossible for that to happen. Yeah. And so it's just so interesting that, you look at the article that you just covered here, and then you look at some of the things like, as I mentioned, what Bianco just said, and what in the world is going on with our job market right now. And I don't think anyone really knows, and the effect that could have, and probably will ultimately have, on people's savings and on their investments, I think could be pretty devastating, because once there's a reason that things are not being told the way they should be, or we're not being given the whole story, and that reason is probably not because things are better than what we're being told. They're probably worse than what we're being told. And on that note, that's where I wanted to actually, cover in this next part of this podcast a little differently than we normally do. How billionaire Ray Dalio, I believe that's how you pronounce it, says he's owning gold to hedge the risk of debt and inflation crises. And the reason I thought this was kind of a good fit for this is because when you look at, again, some of these, the reality is it's not as though there are a lot of people out there who are suggesting or saying that, there's a huge turnaround in store for us in short order here as it relates to the markets and the economy. It's quite the opposite. It's just one report comes out after the next talking about where, there's problems out there. You've got this billionaire investor, Dalio, who, is saying due to debt and inflation, he's actually even saying a crisis. This is why he's hedging himself with gold. Mm-hmm. We've seen central banks doing that. We know that BRICS has been doing that to help better stabilize what their initiative is. Tell us a little more about what it is about gold that will provide a hedge to these kind of uncertainties or problems out there.
Well, one of the points he talks about in here is just simply how gold pretty much stands on its own, right? It doesn't need the dollar backing it or other nations backing it. It backs up nations. It's sort of the original, the OG currency, if you will. And, people can count on that. It's been around for thousands of years. It's not backed by any debt. It's going to have value regardless of what happens to the dollar. And in fact, as we have higher inflation and a weaker currency, that's one of the factors that helps to support gold even more so. I think everybody just realizes, look, governments are printing and spending more than they should. I think everybody agrees that our money supply is probably not managed properly by our politicians. And whether people want to admit it or not, whether we're already in a recession or heading into it, like you said, we know things aren't great out there. And if anything, the numbers are being reported to be a little bit more rosy than they really are. And maybe some of that's going into an election year. They want to try to keep happy voters out there, voting for Biden. But all of those factors together, what is the downside of holding gold for stability? If you're wrong and the markets do even over time here correct themselves and firm up quite a bit, then you're still going to be okay. I tell clients, if in the bad years for gold, you're earning 5, 6, 7% and it's boring, you're probably pretty happy with that. That's not a bad track record. And if things continue to go down a very negative path and you earn more, and more importantly, you're protected by your gold and silver, you're going to be awfully grateful you have it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and that's, it's funny, 5 to 6%, when you talk about gold and its performance, by and large, we advocate being diversified for protection, for stability reasons. It's just by coincidence for now, basically a decade strong, gold has been one of the top performing asset classes out there.
Right.
This year alone, we've talked about it many times, the price projections as much as $3,000 an ounce, whereas we sit today in the 2,300, 2328, I think it was today.
Yeah.
It is not just giving you the benefit of that protection, but it's a great time for people to get involved in this market so they can make a great investment to get a great return if it continues on its same course. So,
oh yeah,
for those of you tuning in, thank you for sharing that, Chris, by the way. For those of you tuning in, it is these type of topics that you can learn more about by contacting our office. Request, as the podcast is entitled, The Secret War on Cash Report. It'll give you a really great breakdown of some of the things that are taking place in our economy. You can get a copy of that by going and visiting us online at www.swissamerica.com. Or feel free and contact our office at 1-800-289-2646 and get a copy of that report. Or if you'd also like to learn a little bit more about what's involved with getting into the gold market, how to invest in gold, you can get all that information as well, and it's all complimentary to you. So thanks so much, Chris. It's been fantastic as usual. We will continue to follow what's going on in the job market and continue to try and make heads or tails of these numbers that keep coming out. But until then, you all have a great rest of your day, and we will see you next time.
thank you.